I want to start by mentioning that about 7 years ago, I made some kind of bold predictions about the future of AI. And I think for the most part, I've been right about AI slop and the implications for search and what kind of our current system looks like. But today I'm going to be talking about what I think the future looks like. So maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. Something that will be enabled by the next generation of AI, not the current generation of AI. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is just that, like, yes, I have predicted some AI things in the past. And so when I make this kind of wild prediction for the future, hopefully you won't think I'm too crazy. So to be, I guess, among many other people who have claimed this, search is dead. I think it's for real this time, at least to a certain extent, at least the search that we've always known. And the caveat to that is long live semantic allocation. So we'll kind of get into that as I go. So I guess first, before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the current AI models and what their limitations are. So GPT and Anthropic and Claude and Gemini and all of these other LLMs are all based on the same underlying technology, which is the transformer model. And the transformer model has been amazing because it can scale up so well, and it ends up having all these emerging capabilities, but it has limitations. It scales in sort of an exponential way. So there's diminishing returns at the top end, and also the amount of energy and compute required is scaling exponentially. So we're sort of hitting this point where we're realizing the deep inefficiencies of transformer models, and that something entirely new needs to come along in order for us to kind of move to the next stage. And in a post-transformer world, what will be solved are these problems with transformers that I've mentioned. So they're like incredible inefficiency over long training periods that make it impossible for them to really have two things. First is that they can't be run on edge devices, so they don't run on phones. They're only on huge data centers. They take up massive amounts of data and information and compute power. And then also they're owned by these companies, right? So they're not really able to be individually controlled over long periods of time. They're not. It's not like an eternal AI companion, and I think that's where we're moving. So when we enter this post-transformer world, where we have models that are capable of what's called continual learning, so they don't need to be trained and then trained again, and then you spend $500 million on training the next one, and then every 3 months or so we get these additional iterations. The next generation of models will be continual learners, so they won't be trained and then launched. They'll just be continually available and learning on the fly as they go. So as you interact with them, they'll become increasingly intelligent, increasingly personalized. All right, we'll go back to the. So the result of this, when you have a situation where every individual person has their own edge-based AI, they own it on their phone, it stays with them likely for years or potentially for the rest of their life. It's a continually learning system, so it's always ingesting new information and becoming better. Search looks a lot different, right? So really what we've been doing over the past 25 years is something that's not really what we want, right? Like we are forced to do searches. Index mediated retrieval. So when we're looking for shoes, we put in things like best running shoes. That's not ultimately what we wanted. We wanted like the perfect running shoe for our exact situation. In order to get there, we probably need to do 10, 20 different searches and do a ton of investigative work. That's all going away. And it's going to go away, especially because these new generations of models will be able to understand us deeply and intimately in ways that the current models can't really, because they're not hyper-personalized and they're not individually owned. They have some memory and prompt injection stuff that you can do to kind of keep them along with what you would want and need and what your personalization is, but they're not hyper-personalized in the way that the next generation will be. So in this future, what you'll have is the AIs will be able to completely intuit what you need. And it will remove really the need for you to do many different searches. So the new physics LLM mediated resolution, where you get a latent intent state. So it understands your goals, your constraints, your history, your risk tolerance, and a million other things about you personally, because you've had a long interaction history with this AI and it's completely personalized to you. That then results in an outcome that is hyper personalized and super specific. So as matching improves, retrieval fades, and ultimately what ends up mattering is the alignment between the final solution and its understanding of your deep intent. So this is sort of the line, the graph that we're on, and maybe we're like here, 2/3 of the way down the line, but what we're trending towards is this zero friction point, where you get a perfect match between the human query and the expected answer. So the answer here doesn't mean truth; it means that the system knows exactly what you want, even if what you want is stupid. It's about pattern matching the intent, not specific truth. So what are the casualties here? The first is just web pages in general. And I think we're already seeing this. I mean, instant AI answers result in people not going to your website. The ones that do, obviously, they convert better because they're much more hyper-targeted personally. So web pages, I think, to some extent, become much less important. What matters about them are the claims that they make, the mechanisms that they use, the examples that they give, how they draw boundaries around information, and the scope of what they are offering to their customers, and then the data points available within those pages. So it's web pages become more of like a source of information for ingestion than they are really about serving the customer. The second casualty is persuasion becomes noise. And this is maybe the biggest change to marketing. When you have a perfect symmetry between need and answer, the marketing fluff that we've all relied on for presenting a brand or a product in a specific way becomes much less important. In fact, it becomes maybe detrimental, because the language models don't care about your marketing fluff. They care about your unique value proposition within the giant sea of other unique value propositions. So the more you try to fluff up your value proposition, the less concrete the language model's understanding of what you are and what you offer is. And so we're going to enter a period where it's really not about trying to persuade the machine. It's about trying to get the machine to understand who you are and what you offer in such a specific and concrete way that it can match you with the hyper-personalized intents that people are now using. And then the click, and it's not just the click, it's a lot of older SEO metrics. Like these things will not, and they're already sort of not really valuable at all anymore because they're so ambiguous. The things that will matter in the future: provenance, so the source origin; coherence, the logical fit to the query and to the intent; and then the evidence quality, so verifiability. So what ultimately matters? What's irreducible is what ultimately matters. So if the language model can guess your content, you don't really exist economically. So these are the things that you need to be thinking about when you're creating content. How do I differentiate from others in a way that makes me a unique source of information within the entire understanding of the language model? So you do this by creating new distinctions. So partitioning the problem space. Where are you in relation to other companies or brands or products? And how are you different? And how are your edges delineated versus others? New mechanisms, so explaining why and not just that. So not rehashing old things, really giving a deeper explanation that doesn't exist elsewhere. New empirical signals. So this has been true for 20 years almost, and it's really what Fractl's always been about: creating new data, presenting something entirely new that contributes in a way that the language models have never seen. New boundary conditions, so where does wisdom fail? New synthesis, connecting separate domains, and then irreducible reliability. So are you a brand that's consistent? So does the language model understand you as consistent across time, consistent across how you're talked about by different sorts of entities? The result of this is a kind of a shift in how the mid, long, and short tail are captured. And so what ultimately will happen when you have individualized AIs that are hyper-personalized and continually learning, you'll get winner-take-all dynamics in the commodities. So there will be some canonical best thing in some product or service that's best for like literally 95% of all people that need that product or service. In those industries, you'll have a winner take all scenario where the language model, pretty much no matter what, is going to recommend a handful of brands. That you can't really change unless you want to become like the commodity. You want to become like the Kleenex of tissues. That's sort of where that will go. But that will be a much smaller portion of the total pie. Right now, what you have is a lot of brands that are sort of like entrenched and get winner take all dynamics because of the limited number of SERP results, right? So there's only 10. If you had, huge link portfolios and really old domains and really well trusted, like you could have winner take all dynamics in a space that probably shouldn't have winner take all dynamics. But what you'll get on the other side is the long tail will expand like exponentially because you'll have hyper personalization, and then you'll have brands that are doing a really good job at representing who they are and what they offer in a super concrete and specific way that can then be matched with the hyper personalized intents. So you get brands that would have never shown up in the top 10 results because they were just tiny or they offer a very niche thing. And with this super increased pattern matching where you get this almost perfect connection between need and want, or between need and answer, the long tail expands dramatically. In the sort of mid tail range, you get winner take most dynamics, where I think a lot of like B2B will play. And this will be about canonical answers. So presenting new information and becoming the one who's like known for answering a specific thing, and through which the industry talks about different topics in reference to you. And then other signals are also going to change. So things like reviews right now are sort of like, you have a review number, right? Your 3 stars or your 5 stars or whatever, and like that's valuable or not. In the future, these language models can do much more with this sort of data, where they are understanding if there's a negative review, okay, what does that say about the product? Maybe it's not that the product is bad. Maybe it's that the user was a bad match for what the product is. And so with that additional understanding, it can better serve someone else who has a much more highly matched intent. So the goal of brands will be to focus their product and service offerings in a very specific way so that they're concrete and highly known by the language models and not diffuse and confusing to the language models. So the end goal here will be not really measuring exposure anymore, but measuring inclusion. So some of the other speakers have spoken a bit more on this, but there's a lot to think about when you want to understand whether or not your brand is actually being represented within these language models in the way that you need it to be, in the way that is specific to what you're offering and isn't confused. So the final test, if you disappear tomorrow, would the system's answers materially change? So that's a question for a lot of people. If you've been creating rehashed content of existing information, then if you were removed, that existing information would already still be there, and you wouldn't really be needed. So if that's the case, you're likely not going to be a canonical answer for a set of search queries. So the final takeaway is don't be found, be needed. Search is not getting smarter, is disappearing into understanding. So if I get on the main stage, what you'll hear is a lot more on the specific details of what these future models look like, what their capabilities will be, what they'll enable and change about SEO and marketing in general, how technical SEO plays into this, and how it becomes essentially like table stakes, what you need to do in order to be included in training data sets, and how to optimize for being included in training data sets. And then understanding how to own a space and what this new paradigm means. So how do you construct a semantic intent map that is accurate to your business and service and that will result in high levels of conversions? And then what sort of content strategies actually work for future paradigms, and how AI can be leveraged for real value creation. So this is a focus of Fractl. How do we use these AI technologies to create new information? So how do we scrape data sets or compile data sets or analyze existing data sets or create new data sets to tell new newsworthy stories that have not been heard before? And then how do you leverage this customization and intent mapping to resolve questions versus returning results? That's it.